Hey guys, how's it going? So what am I working on now? Well, I've got this Chevy Tahoe. I guess it's like a 2010. There again, I don't check the years at first. I just get in them and start checking whatever the customers complain about. Customer's complaint is on this one too about a really bad noise. So just now, I hopped in it. It's got a check engine light, a traction control light, a stability light, and an ABS light. So I'm going to be willing to bet. Oh, and the traction off and StabiliTrak off lights are on too. So I'm going to be willing to bet this thing probably has a bad wheel speed sensor, or hub bearing, I should say, because he is complaining of a noise. So let's take this thing down the street and see what we have. I'll just show you real quick what I have up here. So I don't even know how many miles are on this thing. Where is the thing that shows me the mileage? It's over here. Service four-wheel drive, service spark assist. Wow, this thing's got a whole bunch of service. 165,000. The vehicle does look a little on a not so well maintained side. Let's go with that. So yeah, let's go up the street and see what we got. All right, so we're gonna just head down the street here. Wow. Woo. Okay, you hear that? Yeah, that's like, oh my God, that's bad. That sounds like the rotor's hitting something. So let's see what this thing's doing. Let's turn around here before a wheel falls off. Wow, that's bad. Usually if a wheel bearing gets bad enough for the rotor to be contacting like the caliper bridge or the spindle or something like that, usually it makes noises like this. However, the odd thing is I don't hear a bearing type noise. So could it just be that the bearing failed that bad? Wow, that's bad. All right, let's get this thing in the shop and see what's going on. So we got this thing in the air. Let's take a look. Now just a quick visual. Obviously these tires are hammered. See how bold they are on the inside. And let's see. Anything visual that we can see? It was definitely coming from the left front. Yeah, just got play in that. Let me set up my tripod. Nice ball joint. Look at that. That's not safe. We want to bet that's shot. This thing's got wheel spacers on it. Yeah, look at that. And then people wonder why their axle bearings or hub bearings go bad. When you put wheel spacers on, that puts extra load on the bearing. So it tends to wipe out the bearings. There's one in there too. It's hard to see. But let's set this up on my tripod. Let's see if you can see what I'm talking about here. All right, let's see. I don't know how that's coming out on the video. Let's see if I can focus in a little more. As you can tell, Joe loves to talk. That's like his favorite pastime. Nah, it's not good like that. Because I'm pretty sure all you can hear is Joe talking. Let's see. Can I set this up like that, maybe? All right. So now let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so definitely needs at least a one hub bearing, and then we're gonna have to figure it out from there. So let me get a hub bearing on its way and we'll go from there. This thing is a 2013, I did check. And there we go with the wheel off. I tell you, these wheel spacers, people just don't get it. These things cause so many problems, yet people still use them. Whatever. I've seen wheels fall off. I've seen all sorts of weird stuff happen because of this. Most often I see destroyed hub bearings because of that. Anyway, so here, that's just with the weight. That's just with my hand on there. So I'd be willing to bet somewhere this rotor is hitting that caliper bridge, even though I can't see any marks on either the rotor or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. So something's obviously contacting something. So let me get this idiotic thing off of here, and let's disassemble this. Got to pull the caliper off, then you got to pull the axle nut out, stuff like that. So let's get going on this. Now with that off of there, what we're going to do is we're going to take the caliper, the bridge, the whole thing off as an assembly. And it has two 18mm headed bolts right there. So basically, I'm going to put my swivel impact on it like that, and then we're going to put my gun on it. I already got the bottom one out. That's pretty much it. Let's do that, get the bolts out. So let me do that. Let me hang the caliper now. So there, it's hanging up. So this way it's not putting tension on the hose. That is actually a exhaust hanger, but not the hanger you're thinking about. It's the hanger that they use at the parts store to hang the exhaust pipes from the ceiling. So that's in place. Now we're going to pop the rotor off. It's got a set screw there. This one, you don't need the impact driver for. It's a Torx head. You just need a little gun or whatever and just zip it out. It comes right out and then the rotor will come right off. Set screw came right out. Rotor came loose. So that's just going to come right off. And yeah, look at that. That hub's been replaced before. It's not an original hub. So I'm really curious what the rotor itself was hitting. I don't see any marks in there. But man, I guess it was just growling on itself. Oops. Oh, I'm dropping stuff over here. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I was just dropping stuff. I guess it was just making noise on itself. That's bad. Wow. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get this nut off for the axle. And then we got 3 bolts that hold this thing in place. And then you have the ABS sensor you got to worry about too on this. All right. Zip the nut off. Make sure that the axle moves. Let's see, it does move. Because a lot of times if they get seized up in there, you got to hit them out with like an air hammer or something like that. But since this hub has already been changed, I figured it wouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, once I did get that off too, I realized somebody bear tightened that thing. I mean, it was ungodly tight, like way tighter than it should have been. So I bet you somebody over torqued the snot out of that thing, and that's probably what led to this bearing failure. So let's get the 3 bolts out. Here, they're 15s. Usually you got to get these out with a wrench. Sometimes you can get them out with a socket. It really just depends for some reason, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but sometimes you wind up just using a wrench the whole way to get them out. A lot of times you can't get a gear wrench in there because you don't have enough clearance in between the axle. So let me try getting these out and see how that goes. All right, so I cracked them free at first with a box wrench. Now I got my gun on there because my gun will fit, but see how it's not a good angle? That's why you want to break them free first. And also you got to be careful because see how it's rubbing up on the end of the axle there, the boot? You want to make sure you don't tear it. You can tear it. I have seen people do that. So there you go. So now we get the front one out and then the whole thing should be ready to come out. Okay, I got the front bolt out. So let me see if I can't just strike this and get this out. You're going to strike this like so to get it out. And you see it is separating because now I got movement in that plate. So I got to keep doing that to get that off. No reason for you to watch me do that whole thing, but basically that's what I'm going to do. Just beat the snot out of it and get it off of there. If you needed to save this hub, doing this is not going to save the hub. You're going to destroy it. So just keep that in mind. All right, there it is. It's out. It's on the floor. Hit the ground. So now what I want to do is I'm going to clean up the inside of this. Take a piece of sandpaper. If you have a like porting type tool, a Dremel, something like that, just clean the inside of this up. And then I usually will put a coating of like maybe brake film, the brake lubricant on there, or just something just to keep it from, you know, rusting up and jamming the new one in there. Yeah, let's get that done. So there you see, I got, that's a light layer of grease. It may look sloppy, but it's not. It's a light layer of grease. I got some on the splines too, this way it doesn't rust together. And now when you're putting the backing plate onto the hub bearing, make sure you have it in the right orientation, the right direction. Luckily, this one has that hole there for the hose, for the wiring for the ABS sensor to come through. However, you could flip this thing over and have it on backwards. And if you had it on backwards, you'd wind up hitting the rotor when you put everything together. So now let's get this in place. Many times what I'll do is I'll just get it up and caught and catch the nut on it if I can. You can't always do that. Anyway, I get the nut caught on there, get this thing up in place, and then I just pick it up and get it up in place like so. So now you can catch the bolts from the backside and get them caught in there. And like I've said before, I guarantee you almost nobody's going to torque one of these things. So I'll just show you the right way to tighten this thing up without over torquing anything. And yeah, and always make sure you got your ABS wiring out of the way. Make sure the backing plate is in the right orientation for the caliper, because if you had this thing set over here, because think about it, it can go one of three ways. So if you had this thing over here, you can't get the caliper on. So let's get this on. Let me get the bolts in there and then let me show you what to do. Now, if you want to send them down lightly, like I got the bolts caught there, if you want to send them down lightly with your gun, go right ahead, but don't tighten them. And you want to go, it's not tight, it's just, see, so now that should be good like that. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take your wrench and tighten it up with your wrench. I had already done the front one with the gun like that, just to bring it down. So let me put this down so I can get my wrench on there. And so now I got my 15 box wrench. As you can see, I do have leverage to this thing. So there, snug, snug. I'm going to go to the front one. It's a little bit of a pain because now I'm going to have to cut the wheels the other way to get to it. So let me do that. Now in this situation, I'm going to snug it. I'm trying to film this and do this at the same time. Sometimes it's difficult. So there, it's snug and it's getting kind of tight. Now the other ones are already snugged up, so I'm not worried about tightening this. You don't want to just tighten one and then go to the next. So there, that's pretty tight. I could go tighter. Don't. It's like you could feel it. It gets tight. That's tight. Let me rotate the, or let me cut the wheels the other way and get the other one. And now the final bolt. There. That's nice and tight. I can go tighter if I wanted to. But you can kind of feel it comes to a stop. Just stop at that point. So now, here comes the axle nut. Actually, no, we're not going to worry about this yet because I want to get the rotor and everything else on first. So let's get the rotor on. Let me get that set screw in. Some hubs do not come with the set screw hole in it. I've seen that before. If they don't have it, don't worry about it. It's not detrimental. It's really there for assembly. If you don't have it, put a lug nut on backwards. Basically, you're going to take the lug nut and just go with the shouldered end facing the opposite direction and screw that down to hold the rotor in place. It's only there to hold the rotor in place. That's it. No other purpose. So if you don't have one, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. All right, guys, I want to try a little something here. Now, I know I've heard people in the past complain, how do you stop the rotor from turning? Just take a screwdriver, stick it in the slots of the rotor, and let it hit the caliper bridge right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this socket and short breaker bar that I have, or short half-inch drive ratchet that I have, and I'm going to tighten up that nut. Now, I've never done this before this way, but I want to see if this is going to work. And my reason for doing this is because I know a lot of you guys don't have torque wrenches. Now, you can rent a torque wrench from the parts store. So now this is supposed to be torqued to 177. So there, it just stopped. Now, I did tighten it down before with the gun, or I brought it down with the gun. I didn't tighten it. So this way I knew the axle was seated. So now, this way I wouldn't have to fight it this way. So now, this thing just stopped. So now, how tight can I get it? Now, if you look, this is only, an 18-inch bar. So, let me see how tight I can get this thing. Now, I would think that that's tight enough. I'm curious on how tight that actually is. Let me get a torque wrench on there. I'm going to put a digital one on just to see. Alright, so I got my digital torque wrench out, and I have it set, I don't know if you can see that. It's set to 177. That's the torque spec for this. So let me see what it actually is. I'm going to see where it starts to move. It actually is. So it went up to 190. So, I'm confident with that. I'm happy with that. To me, that's good. Right at 190 is when it started to break. So if you think about it, using an 18-inch breaker bar or whatever on there, you get it pretty darn close to spec. So if you use the gun, you'd never know where you're at. So, all right, let's finish putting this together. And there, like I said, screwdriver up in there that holds it, no problem. Not a pry bar, not a punch, not a chisel. Don't forget that. All right, so now I'm going to put the idiotic wheel spacer on. I got the wheel speed sensor hooked up. That was no big deal. No reason to even show you that. And yeah, everything else is on and tight. So let's get the wheel on and then let's take it for a quick ride. All right, guys, so we're on a road test. Everything sounds fine. All the lights except the check engine light shut off. As you can hear, there's no noise. So I guess all that growling noise, since I didn't see any witness marks from the rotor hitting anything, all that noise had to be just from the hub bearing itself. So I'm pulling over into my rest stop area here now. So anyway, that's kind of it. Hopefully you got something out of that. And I was kind of interested in that torque spec myself. I mean, 177 and it clicked off at 190 before it started to move. So technically 190 is when it started to move. I probably missed it a little bit. So I was pretty darn close. If you think about it, when you're that high on the torque scale, that's pretty darn close. So I'd be comfortable with, I am comfortable with it. I left it alone. I'm absolutely comfortable with that. If it was my own car, I'd be absolutely comfortable with it. Just don't use a gun. Use a gun and you ugga-dugga it. You know, you have no clue what your torque is going to be. You know, you could be 500-600 foot-pounds, you know, for all you know. So, and I've seen people do that. They go, wah! And they just jam them down and they're done with them. And it's just, no, don't do that. That can destroy the hub bearing, especially because some of them, they require some preload, or they require that the axle actually bottoms out on the inside part of the bearing. Some of them don't. Some, the actual hub piece itself stops the axle, and then it's not an issue. I got a tractor trailer here trying to make a left, so not a big deal. But anyway, so I just thought I'd share that with you. So anyway, if you're getting something out of my videos, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.